Hi, this is Takatoshi Shibayama, host of the Future Design Podcast. In this episode, we have two gentlemen from Asia Institute of Mentoring, Lawrence and Yen Lu. Mentorship has been an essential part of career development, but when organizational structures are changing, less hierarchy, divisional shifts, and more people joining the gig economy, how do we seek the right mentors? Also, the way mentorship is being conducted has to change. Not only do the younger generation need it, but also the older generation needs it too. The way the technology is changing our lives very quickly, they need to upskill and reskill, and they need mentorship for that as well. They share their own experiences as mentees towards the last section, so stick around to the end. So this day and age where there's a lot of self-help books, there's a lot of information out in the internet that allows people to read and digest how they can nurture themselves as they go through their careers. And also, if we think about the size of the companies nowadays, they're actually becoming much smaller or leaner in that sense, where there's middle management has shrunk and allows for a more flatter organizations to run itself. So in these changing times, the traditional mentoring model must have changed quite a lot. And in your view, what do you think is the best way that mentorship can go?
Sure, that's an interesting question. I think, mentoring, has to change together with changing of the times. I think that's true. I think, but the basic premises on which mentoring is a way that we can develop people and grow people. That hasn't changed, and mentoring has been around for thousands of years. Right. The last time I looked is like goes back to probably 2,000 or 3,000 years ago, starting from the Greek time or even the old, during ancient Chinese early days. Right. So, but I think, one of the things we've been talking about is virtual mentoring. So I think that since everything's moving virtually, a lot of it will be, and this pandemic has accelerated that trend for sure. And we're probably not going to go back to the way it was. So I think mentoring has to adjust in that way. Traditional mentoring works best face-to-face. We know that, right? But I think moving forward, I think we're going to see a lot of that moving online, virtually. So I think in that way, as mentors, we have to adjust in terms of how we interact with our mentees. So I think that's one thing. And maybe Lawrence, you want to add to that?
Yeah, I do actually. The concept around mentoring doesn't change at all, actually. Whether it's not the future or whether it's the past. I say this because mentoring, if used correctly, is actually a change model. It's also a growth model. It's a growth catalyst, I call it. And it requires not just the culture, the values, or the leadership to sort of move it. What it requires are people who actually want to go into mentoring. I think the important building blocks around mentoring is the model itself, is the fact that, as Yen Lu actually alluded to, key to it is the changing environments that are now cropping up and taking the center stage. For example, in working from home, the key concept that sits on this mentoring is actually what we call remote mentoring. Remote mentoring is, in other words, also Yen Lu's term, virtual mentoring. But it doesn't change the way we do mentoring, because the best way is actually face-to-face. With the remote mentoring, what happens really is the fact that you need to be more prepared for it. That means you have to prepare for the discussion. You can't just go there, talk face to face, and make it happen. You need to prepare, both parties need to prepare to have that discussion and then share it before they actually get to it. Then there's more value to it. That's one of the key things that will change the mentoring model in the future.
Yeah, I think these type of Zoom calls or whatever platforms they use, it doesn't seem like it's a format for just chatting, whatever. Obviously you could do that with your friends when you're in quarantine, but when you're actually using this for work, you need it to be very effective because you're not actually watching face to face, sitting right in front of each other, and you need to be very punctual. You need to be effective, and then need to be very concise about what you actually talk about. Now, that is the method of doing mentoring. But now in these days, and there's the studies that talk about the millennials, the Gen Zs, they all want something different from mentoring than before. What I mean by that is that corporate culture has been in the forefront for a lot of these people in the generations. They want cultural fit. They want to know the people. They want to like the people. The companies that they're joining. They no longer are thinking about what is my career progression. Of course, that's a little bit, that's secondary. They want to be able to be a good fit within the organizations. And that's where I think mentoring is really important. Because if you want to retain talent, especially in this gig economy these days, if you want to retain talent, I think mentoring is probably the most important thing going forward for companies.
Yeah, absolutely. I think you raise a good point. I think more and more young people, millennials, if you call them, they're looking for something, beyond just the immediate gig, right? They're looking for a bit more, deeper. Some people call that purpose, or meaning, if you will. Many are asking those questions. You talk about the culture of the company. Again, there's no better way to inculcate the culture of a company than through mentoring, right? Those that are been around, the leadership, to pass on their wisdom, the value system of the company. There's no better way, I would say, than this one-on-one mentoring opportunities that you can have with the younger employees. So yeah, absolutely. Mentoring, I think, is, for us, is actually become ever more important in this age of change, right? So the things that don't change much, that are longer lasting, that are more strategic, are the values and the culture of the company. Those usually don't, and those are passed down actually since from the founders, right? A lot of the values and the culture are the foundation have been laid down from the founding days. Like Apple was think different, right? Going deeper into the why, so you want to do something. So yeah, so I think this is a very important point.
Yeah. So just to add on, I think it's just so important that we realize that the millennials are crafted differently, as with the baby boomers and even the newer generation that's coming into play right now. They're definitely built differently. Their DNAs are different, and there's certain things that they look for. One of the key things that we need to be mindful of when we're doing mentoring is the fact that the time that they take, they're very impatient about the amount of time they spend on things. So how we do mentoring would also be important, and how we face them, because mentoring, a lot of them, especially the millennials and the younger generation, they tend to be very open about how they see things. They understand who they are most of the time. But one of the things that is really missing is the understanding of self. Because all mentoring starts from within the person itself first, before we step forward. And if we can get them to understand that, I think the base by which they will move forward would even be faster through mentoring. Because that would be the first step that they need to take. The other thing is that they need to consider is also the purpose of why they want mentoring. Because if they really feel that mentoring is something that will make them better, that belief will drive the purpose of what mentoring really stands for.
Yes, going back to what you were saying before, that if you want these virtual mentorings to actually really work, you really need to know what you want out of it. And I think the first step for that is to understand who you are, the self realization of what you want, what is your passion, what you need out of this mentorship, and then be able to seek advice from that. So what do you think are the methods that we can apply as trying to understand who we are? Because you could go through halfway through life not really knowing who you are, and you waste half of your life because of that. Do you think there's a structure or a routine or anything that you can put into place where you can actually understand who you are?
I think formality makes a difference. Consistency in the way we do things. The toolkit that we bring onto the table, which AIM does, just help the process. Because virtual mentoring requires processes, step by step. And then the people who are out there right now, the even the baby boomers and the millennials and the new generation, they require processes in place. Because when they see form stages and processes, it sort of helps them understand where they're going to, what are the goals that they're trying to reach, and how they're going to get there as well. So that's the first step, right? And then they also need to build foundations around it as well. They need to be very clear about what is it that they're trying to achieve. And they need to also understand that mentoring is about them. It's not about somebody else. It's all about them. And any mentoring that they do, right, it's for them. So those are key to the success of mentoring. Key is also, and I think this is an important point I need to emphasize on, is the feeling of vulnerability. That means the ability to actually expose yourself so that people understand you better. I think that's another key component.
Going back to your, at AIM, we always say that mentoring is a journey of self-discovery. Both for the mentors and I think for the mentees as well. So it is the mentor's job to help the mentee on this journey of self-discovery, which constitutes, as you mentioned, self-realization. But that begins with self-awareness, by knowing who you are, asking the bigger questions, helping the mentee to ask the bigger questions in life. Who am I really? Who am I? What do I want? What are my deepest desires? What do I want? How can I be of service? Right? I think the Japanese call it ikigai, right? Ikigai, we're all familiar with that, which is life purpose. It's finding out, your passion, your talent, what you're good at, your passion, what drives you, what your motivations, knowing what the world wants and how we can serve, what the world needs, right? So it's continuously asking those bigger questions about life, and helping the mentee to ask those questions of themselves, to help them answer those questions. That's the ultimate, I think, for me, the ultimate role that the mentor can play is to find that the journey of self-discovery, right? Ultimately, self-realization.
Yeah, that's very interesting that you mentioned that it's the mentor's job is also to help the person understand who they are, what is their passion. I think, for the mentors themselves, if they haven't gone through that practice themselves, it's probably very difficult to get it out from their mentees as well. Now, before in the traditional world, we had generally corporate ladders, and people would just stay in one company and try to move up that ladder. And maybe there was a bit more process in mentoring people because there was not much fluidity in people, the employees in these companies. But now, as people move around different companies, I think the information that people can get while they're doing these mentorings can change over time in different life stages as well. As we grow older and we, as younger generations or older generations, we have to actually learn from each other. So now in these ages, let's say we're doing a video editing, like, we want to post something on YouTube. Obviously, as an older person, we need to ask younger people because they know what attracts them, what catches their attention. And at the same time, as we have more life experiences in an older generation, we can pass on a lot more knowledge and experience to the younger generations. By doing that, what I would want to call peer mentoring is that we can grow better together. Now, is there such method in mentoring that you can apply to this system?
Absolutely. I think we always talk about, even in traditional mentoring, especially at AIM, we always talk about mentoring being a two-way street, that both the mentors and mentees will benefit from this relationship, right? Not only will the mentee learn and be guided, but the mentor themselves learn. I think that's, as human beings, as long as we're curious and we're compassionate, right? We're open. we keep an open mind, and we have an understanding heart, then we will always be on a journey to learn. I mean, learning is one of the most, I can't imagine the day I stop learning, right? Then that will be the day that I stop living, no matter how old I am. That's the thing. I think that the desire, that the passion for learning has driven me all my life. So learning has to come from that space, and mentoring is a platform for that kind of learning from another person, no matter how old they are, whether they're a mentor or mentee, right? As long as we're curious, we're open, and we're passionate about life itself, we want to experience life itself, then, this is a great platform. So absolutely, I think I always believe we can learn from anyone. I can learn from a child if I only willing to listen and observe. I can even learn from an animal if I'm only willing to listen and observe. Right. So I think it's having that kind of mindset.
So to that point, right, about learning from each other, learning from different generations, right? I think the basic concept around mentoring is that you have the opportunity, especially with the younger generation now, with the amount of Google research they can do quite easily. The learning from mentors is also very different in the sense that the feeling that they get just by connecting, the relationship that they can build, the understanding about how people actually deal with things in different generations, right, would help them to also deal with challenges that they're facing right now. Because the experiences from the baby boomers, for example, those lessons that are being learned from there are not actually useless. It actually applies very, very well into the current generation as well. It's just that they got to be able to take it and be able to use it the way they want to use it. I think the connections are virtual in that sense. I don't know whether that makes sense, but that's how I feel. That, for example, we talk about mentoring, right? That every time I do matching, especially in the younger generation, they would say, I want somebody who's about my age. Sometimes you don't learn much doing that. Sometimes from an older person, you actually learn much more. So the exchange of ideas across these generations, right, actually is very important as well in what we're trying to do. Because when we create mentoring as a culture, it cuts across all sorts of boundaries, especially the age boundary.
Can you give an example of how you were mentored as well? Because you two have a very long career in business, so it'll be interesting for everybody to understand how you came up with this.
Maybe yesterday was a good example, right? I mean, we did a gig mentoring for Hope initiative yesterday, and what is mentoring? We're talking about mentoring for tech startups, for example. I think tech startups, what they do is, I call it inspirational mentoring. Inspirational mentoring is where the guy will come and say something, and the young startup founder would sit there and he's inspired by the way this guy is talking about it. So he's being mentored in a different way, right? So that helps him to sort of get ideas about how he wants to do a certain thing. He wants a certain outcome for his startup. I only talk about this because it's an important point from the last question that I had. Now, mentoring experience for me, it was more about how I started my career. My first mentor was actually somebody who ran Asia Pacific breweries, and he didn't spend a lot of time mentoring me. Yeah, all he used to just in passing, so gave me sound bites. Like for example, he would ask me to do something, and I would look at him, and I would pick up, and then he would say, I know why you're asking, you're thinking like that, and he would basically say that, Lawrence, even though this is a very small thing, this is something that if you don't do properly, it will kill you. The big projects, you will know, it's always there in your face. But the small things, like when I tell you to remind me to call my wife at 6 o'clock and you forget, I would turn around and think, that, I asked Lawrence to remind me to call my wife at 6 o'clock, but he forgot. Can I trust him with something that I want him to do for me going forward? So I learned from that. So, and he didn't spend a lot of time. There was no formality around it. But mentoring takes different forms because it's not just about formality. It's also about informality. When people mentor you, sometimes you may not see them for 6, 7 months, but suddenly there's an urging for you to ask some questions, some advice. You call them. So those are the experiences that I had, that I've learned that mentoring, we should never put them in a box. That they come in different shapes and sizes. But what is important is that there's a connection, there's chemistry, that you feel safe, that you trust, you respect, and you understand that person, and you know the person is looking after you. That is very important in mentoring. For me, that was the experience I had.
And Lou, do you have an experience when you were a mentee?
Yeah, absolutely. I think we all started off as mentees in some way, shape, or form. Yeah, I mean, I tell this story a lot. So actually, my first exposure to mentoring was in the corporate world. Obviously, it was just 25, maybe 26 years ago, 27 years ago. It was in the Silicon Valley. It was at Apple. I was working at Apple at the time. At the time, I remember very distinctly, I was promoted. I call it demotion, actually. I was promoted from an individual contributor to a manager, a line manager. I was a pretty good, I was, so, you hear the same story over again, that the best technical people usually get promoted to be a manager. Right? And then most of the time, I have no idea how to do it, right? Because managing, being a technical guy is very different from being a good manager. And of course, at the time, I had no idea how to be a manager, right? I had to swim or I'll sink. So, and luckily, my manager at the time knew my challenges, and he enrolled me in the Apple mentoring program at the time, which is very, very new. It was only the second year running, and I think I did that for a year. At the same time, I realized I really needed help, so I also requested for a coach, a leadership coach. So together with the mentorship, and my mentor at the time was a senior person. He was a VP at the time at Apple, which later became a general manager in one of the big divisions. We had, it was an amazing program, the Apple mentorship program. I learned so much from it. I had maybe half a dozen meetings with my mentors over the course of maybe 6 months or so. I remember he didn't say a lot, but everything he said really, really counted for me, where I was, in that space and time where I was, right? I was so thirsty to want to learn and to learn how to do it, to be a good manager. So some of the things he said to me, I can still remember to this day, and I apply it. For example, one of the things he told me was, to be a individual contributor is about managing tasks. It's about managing tasks. A manager is all about managing context, the environment of the group. So that really, really stuck to me. So being a leader, good leader, is about managing context of the people that you're managing. Whether that's a vision, whether that's the work environment, the culture, all these are context for a team or organization, right? So those two together with the leadership, coaching that I got over the course, maybe a year or so, that really transformed me from a tech geeky guy, which I had been all my life until then, very focused on the tech stuff, to someone that's really, really passionate about people and about leadership. And actually, that's one of the reasons I together with Lawrence, I started AIM, because I want to bring that forward. It's amazing. It's been an amazing, amazing journey for me. So let me tell you. So after that, I remember I got into, because I just love to learn, right? So I remember I read everything about leadership. from that day. Everything I had to get my hands about leadership. You know, whether it's a book, whether it's Harvard Business Review article, right? To suck it all in terms of what does it mean to be a good leader? How do we lead with, right? How do we actually lead people? And there's so much I learned from that experience. That's benefited me all my life. Sorry, it's a long story, but I think and that's why I think that's why I am who I am and where I am today, because of that experience 20 something years ago.
Yeah, long stories are good when they're very good stories. And I find your experience in Apple, especially back in those days, 25, 26 years ago, was a very different time from Apple. But you can already see the genesis of what Apple has become, you know. And that is very interesting how you tie that into why you're actually trying to do this. So, Asia Institute of Mentoring, when did you start this again? And then what is the aim for this institution?
We soft launched actually in about a year and a half ago. So January 11, 2019. So last January. So I remember the date. So it's all about trying to, we all do, and I'm sure you do too. I know Lawrence does. We all do mentoring in one form or another. I know a lot of people do mentoring. We looked around, but the question is, how about the quality? But there's no talk of standard or quality. So number one, we want to what we call raise the standard and raise the game and up the standard in mentoring. Number one. Number two, very important, because we always say, as a mentee, if you're a mentor, mentors are like, as a mentee, mentors are like a box of chocolate, right? You never know what you're gonna get. And if it's sweet, sometimes it's not even so sweet, right? It could be bitter. So if you don't get a good mentor. So quality is very, very important. Second thing, it's about expanding the mentoring ecosystem, right? Raising the quality, expand the mentoring ecosystem by working with many partners, including corporates as well. And then really about spreading the benefit of mentoring everywhere to all facets of society, not just tech, not just entrepreneurship, not just youth, but change makers, PMEDs, parenting, social workers. Right? So we really want, because we believe so strongly in the power of mentoring, because of our own person, we want to bring it everywhere. We want everyone to benefit from it, right? Both as a mentor and as a mentee. And ultimately, you can go to our website. It's about using mentoring to help bring about a kinder, gentler, more inclusive, more just, and more sustainable world. That's our ultimate dream.
But what's really critical about what we are trying to do, right? One of the key reasons, right, is that the formality of it. I think it's been missing in the corporate world where I spend a lot of my time. There wasn't any real formality as to what are the standards that mentors are pegged by, are held by, or responsible for. So we just identify mentors. Unlike coaching, where there's really an identification process, mentoring is you're good, you're friendly, your personality fits. Okay, you go and mentor this guy. So what Yanu and myself actually decided was, one of the things we want to have in place is consistency. We want something that is sustainable, something that people recognize as a very important strategy in anything they want to do, especially in building their people, especially in growing and developing their people, especially in the way they want to grow their business through the people. But also, we also want to build what I call CSC, a very caring, a very compassionate, a very supportive society throughout the world. Because mentoring is really something that comes from the heart. People do it because they want to do it. And that's what we're trying to cultivate here. A culture where people actually care about other people, where people are willing to step forward and support and be compassionate, showing empathy and showing sympathy and being able to actually reach out, knowing that currently the world is changing so fast, and especially with this pandemic that's going on, it's changing the environment. So now It gives AIM the opportunity to step up completely and sort of change the way in which we want to function and really, really put the word care and compassion in the right place. In the past, when I was doing mentoring was not one of the key strategies. I believe moving forward in the future now, that's going to change. The way in which we look at how we need to care for our people, how we need to look after them, mentoring can take center stage. So that's why I talked earlier on about, in the past discussions that we had, Taka, about taking mentoring in as a culture that will change the landscape that we're living in right now. That's why AIM is there. That's why Yendu and I, although we didn't know all this was happening, I think the pandemic has had many, many positives because it's changed the way we are starting to think about looking after our people. And people and organizations will now, when they say people are my most important asset, they really have to mean it. They really have to look after them. And how do they do that? Taking care of them. And through what? Through mentoring.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Before, I guess the mentoring was what a kind of a byproduct or a subproduct of part of corporates. But now I think more and more it's going to be on the forefront of how you care for your employees, how you care for the younger, the older generations, everybody involved. And it's all about sharing. And I love that concept that, it is not like a commercialized service that you're providing. It's more about coming from the heart, which I find that is a very unique value proposition for people who come to your place. So thank you very much for your time. Hi, this is your host Takatoshi Shibayama. Thank you for listening all the way to the end. Now, if you enjoyed or disliked this show, please let me know by writing in the comment section. The only way I can improve or add value to you is through your voices. If there are any topics that you would like me to pick up, please also let me know in the comments. I'd love to start chatting with you all. And if you would like to continue watching the show, please subscribe. Thank you.